talking about Hasidus, the historical connection between the Hasidic movement, which predated the Mussar movement. What's the connection between those two movements historically?
Yeah, so one way of looking at it is that both of them are responses to the challenges of emancipation and Haskalah. Meaning you had this idea that Jews are getting emancipated, which means they're getting secularized, they're getting exposed to modern ideas that are antagonistic to the Torah. And we have a real challenge here. We're losing people, we're losing neshamas, we're losing young people who are going off to all sorts of other jirachim, whether secular education, whether it's political agitation, whether it's communism, whether it's secular Zionism. So in many, many ways, you can actually look at both Mussar and Hasidus as two efforts to kind of arouse passion and fervor and connection to Torah, to keep you within the miskeret of Shemiras Torah and mitzvahs. So in fact, we actually find that part of why, the Vilna Gaon had many problems with Hasidus in the early years of Hasidus, but interestingly enough, Rav Chaim Volozhiner, although he had his disagreements, but Rav Chaim Volozhiner was much more conciliatory. There were Hasidim learning in Volozhin and the like. They say Rav Yitzhak of Volozhiner had Hasidic Sfarim that he learned from. And some claim that even the Nefesh HaChaim may have been influenced by the Tanya. Okay, that's again an open question, but there's a little bit of support for that, because much in the Nefesh HaChaim does echo the Tanya that had been printed a few years earlier. But again, I can't make the claim. But when Rav Chaim was asked at one point, like, why is he moving away from the attitude of his own Rebbe, the Vilna Gaon, he basically responded that, Haskalah is a common enemy that's bigger than both of whatever machloksim we have. Chasidus, Misnagdis, whatever you want to call it. Okay, these is the Kehillah of Shomrei Torah mitzvahs. There's a common thread out there of taking people away from Torah and mitzvahs. We have to come together, and that I think is the approach ad hayom hazeh in terms of Hasidim and non-Hasidim getting together. So I think they both have a common feature of fighting a common enemy, but it's more than that. It's not just they're fighting a common enemy. I think they do have much in common in terms of what they represent, and they represent what you might say an emphasis on the internalization of mitzvos, that mitzvos should not just be superficial actions, but they should be based on feeling, on thoughts, on preparation, on refinement. As the Zohar says, Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem are the wings that carry your mitzvos up the Shemayim. And I think both Hasidus and Mussar taught that. Now, there may be a difference in emphasis. Of course there is. That's what Nefesh HaChaim is addressing. That Hasidus may have emphasized the internal spiritual element to such a great degree that sometimes the practical halacha was denigrated. And that's what Rav Chaim Volozhiner is constantly talking about in the Nefesh HaChaim. The ikar is the Maisa. So what always happens in Judaism is that a movement arises and emphasizes certain nikudot, which are very important, but then you kind of need a counter movement to bring out the other nikudot. And the truth is going to lie in the dialectical push and pull between the two movements. Meaning, there is much in Hasidus that we need to incorporate in the Litvisher tradition, and there is much in the Litvisher tradition that needs to be incorporated in Hasidus. There needs to be cross-fertilization. And once again, Reb Dessler was someone who saw that very, very, very clearly in the integration that he effected in his masterful work, Michtav Eliyahu.